Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. I'm a coach for highly sensitive people and empaths. And today what I want to chat with you about is when you are someone who likes and wants to help people. This is great, right? It's great to help people, and without people helping each other, where would we be? But if you're someone who wants to help other people, you also need to know when to stop. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So it's hard to know. It's hard to know when to stop, because when you see someone suffering, you see someone hurting, your natural inclination is going to be to keep trying and to keep helping until they feel better, right? That's the reward in a way that you get. You're like, okay, job well done. They were suffering, they were stuck, they were hurting, they were not okay, they were struggling, and now they're doing okay again. Yay, But it's not always possible to get there. And as someone who likes to help others, you need to recognize when you need to stop, because you're stuck on a skateboard behind a truck that's out of control and you're refusing to get off, right? This can be really dangerous. And the thing is, if you're a helper and you have other people depending on you, then you cannot let one person going off the rails sabotage your helping efforts for others. Because that's what happens, right? Like if you get pulled along too far into someone else's misery, and then you go under with them, then you cannot help anyone else, and then you might be the one who then gets stuck and needs help because you're not doing okay. Which, by the way, is totally fine to get stuck and need help. But it's in the long run, if this becomes a pattern, if you're trying to help people and then you help them too much and then you get really stuck, you want to catch and break that pattern, because it ultimately does, damage to you, and it holds you back from helping other people that you actually can help. Okay, so I want to talk about some of these things, and some of them are going to be more obvious maybe, and some of them are probably going to be things you haven't heard about before. So one of the reasons it can be hard to stop is obviously because you've invested into this person, into this problem, into this situation. Maybe you spent hours listening to them. Maybe you spent hours researching, how you could help them and what might help them or what might be going on with them. Maybe you just spent a lot of time thinking about it, and you spent a lot of time and energy and also hope that you invested in this person. Maybe this person even becomes symbolic for you of what is possible in the world, and if you give up on them, it feels like you're kind of giving up on humanity as a whole. Right? So there can be a lot of personal investment when you're someone who likes to help others, and it's important to be aware of this, that just because you've invested a lot doesn't mean you need to keep investing more, right? And there's a psychological term for this, and I can't think of it right now. But there's something around the investment cost that you have put in. And then you feel this loss, and you're kind of afraid of letting go because you've already invested too much. A more like everyday way we see this is, if this is one of the reasons people don't complain about restaurants. I know some people do, but a lot of people don't, right? When they're unhappy about the food, because they've already spent all this time to get there. They've gotten together with their friends. They've paid money for the meal. And so then to say, after I've invested all this time, effort, energy, money into this experience, actually it sucks, is something that a lot of people are not willing to do. It's the same principle. So, you can just imagine if this already applies to a restaurant that, you might not be too happy to criticize, because you kind of want it to go well. You want the food to be good because you paid for it and you made the reservation and you're excited about it. So to admit to yourself that actually I didn't really like it and it was a waste of time, it was a waste of money, I'm never going here again, it's a big downer. It's not. And so from an emotional perspective, it's something a lot of people try to avoid. It's like you try to avoid feeling down. So you're like, oh no, actually it was kind of nice and this is good, and this, you try to look for good things about the restaurant you don't actually like. Okay. And if this is already happening with restaurants, imagine what it's like when you're trying to help someone and you've invested weeks, maybe months, maybe years of your time into this person. And now you have to kind of come to terms with, maybe this is not helping, maybe this is not working, maybe this person is never going to get better, or at least whatever you're doing isn't making a difference. That's hard, right? So that's the first reason why it can be really hard to step back and say, maybe 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 my helping isn't helping. Okay, so that was the first reason. Second reason why it can be really hard is that you don't necessarily know when to stop. It's easy to say, oh, you should stop investing in someone if your help is obviously not helping. But how do you know that your help is not helping? How do you know that someone is actually not, taking any of your advice, is not really interested in what you're saying, is not doing anything that you're suggesting? How do you know that that's really the case? Because sometimes people will kind of, not actually do what you say, but they don't tell you, or it may take a while before they kind of come on board and they're like, okay, actually that makes sense. Or they might be working on, their stuff, and initially things seem to get worse because all their old issues are surfacing, and so things look worse, but actually they're getting better because this person is dealing with their issues. So in order to assess if your help is helping, you need to know what are the things you need to measure. What are the indications that you need to look for? And this is different for every particular problem, right? Every problem that you might want to help someone with has its own kind of learning curve. As in, where do people get stuck? When does it look like they're not making progress, but actually they are? What are the things you need to pay attention to? So when you specialize in a particular problem, helping people with a particular problem, it's going to take a while before you start to see, oh, this help is really paying off and this is really benefiting the person, or this is just a total waste of time. And if you're pioneering into a new field, you're kind of intuitively making your way into a new field of helping people, this is going to be even bigger. You're going to have an even bigger sense of, you think you're helping, you think this is working, and then later you discover some other things about your field of expertise that you didn't know, and then you realize like, oh, maybe this is not doing what I thought it was, right? Maybe this is not working the way I thought it was. So this can get really, really tricky. And if you're confused by this, it's not just you, this is just how life works. This is also one of the things that in science, when people are developing new theories, and so in thinking about science, the philosophy of science, this is a very common problem, let's say. This idea of, okay, if you're a scientist and you're testing a new theory, how do you know when to stop and how do you know to give up your theory because it's just bullshit, and it's just really not helping? Or do you need to persist and try some new experiments and, make some adjustments to your existing theory? Like, when do you give it up completely and when do you keep going because you might get somewhere with it? Like, often there's no real way to know, right? And so you can have a lot of people who are working on a particular theorem for years, and after 30 years they might still not have any results to show for it. So that also depends on your personality at some point. What are you happy to live with? But there's no foolproof way often to know for sure, this is helping, this is not helping. Obviously, if someone's getting great results, then it's helping, right? Then like, oh, okay, this is really working. But even then, somebody can get superficial great results, but maybe there's a bigger problem looming under the surface that's growing meanwhile, right, that you didn't even see. So this gets really, really complicated. And if you're saying, no, it's actually very simple, I would say that you probably are not an expert in the field that you're helping people with. Because once you get into the nitty gritty and the depths of, the complicated stuff, the places where people really get stuck, it becomes hard to know at some point, is this helping, yes or no? And at a certain point, you have to make a decision based on how are you doing, right? If you're doing great, and if the person that you're trying to help wants your help still, and you think you're getting somewhere, but you're not sure, but you think so, by all means, keep going, right? But if at some point you start to feel deflated and exhausted and worn out, and maybe the other person wants to keep receiving your help, but you're not feeling it anymore, then it might be time to stop. And conversely, also, if you're still really enthusiastic, but the person you're trying to help is not enthusiastic at all, then you definitely need to stop. Because whether they want to get on board with this or not is going to define and determine whether you can help them at all. Okay, so that's the second reason it can be hard to know when to stop when you're helping people. Now, the third reason is much, much, much deeper, and it's probably going to be very, very hidden. And so when I say this, you might think, oh, that doesn't apply to me at all. That's not true, blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you, underneath the surface, there is some of this going on. So when you feel really, really, really called to help someone, even though you're starting to see evidence that really your help is no longer helping, maybe it was before, right? Like it was helping, but now it's at a point where it's really not helping anymore. And or you start to see that the person is really just resisting and rejecting and pushing away you and your help, but you still feel obligated to keep going. You feel like, but we need to solve this problem, and you start to get kind of obsessed about it. This is a really important time to look deeper. Like, what is it inside of you that is compelling you to keep going even when it's obviously not healthy and it's not working? And here there's something really, really interesting that I found is that we can have all kinds of energy connections with people, often also from past lives. So these are really, really deep. They're really old. It's stuff you've forgotten about. You don't realize you have this connection. But when you have energetic connections with people and those people start living really unhealthy lives, it can really start to affect you energetically. So it's kind of like being tied to the wrist, with somebody else. And you got to go through life like connected to this person, whether you like it or not. And if they start to do dangerous things, like they start to jump off buildings, you're kind of pulled along with them, right? And so it can get really scary. And jumping off building is obviously it's a metaphor, right? Like I'm saying they're doing things that are scary and you don't want to go there with them. You're like, I don't want to go there. Please come back. And they're really determined that they want to go there. They want to do that thing. And you're stuck connected to them, right? And when you're actually physically connected to someone, you can see, and it's obvious to everyone else. But when you're energetically connected, it's not obvious. It's not obvious to you. It's not obvious to anyone else. And so people might wonder, why do you feel so responsible for this person? It doesn't make any sense. Like, why are you trying so hard to heal them, to help them, to support them? Well, it might be because you're energetically connected to them. This person is starting to do dangerous stuff, and you're starting to get deep, deep down afraid that they're going to drag you down with you. Now, these emotions are not going to be on the surface, right? The surface emotions are going to be, I just want them to be doing well. It just hurts my heart to see them suffer, all that kind of stuff. But deeper down, there's also another motivation, which is, please make them stop, because this is ruining my life, because I cannot disconnect from them. And so their fate becomes my fate. If this resonates, or part of you is like, something about that is kind of, making me feel things, then it is possible to disconnect from a person like this. But that's where energy work comes in, right? That's where healing work comes in. That's where the healing work I do with clients comes in. It's finding where you connect to this person. How are you connected? How do we disconnect you energetically so that they can have their own life, you can have your own life, and they can do all of the crazy stuff they want to do without it like affecting your life personally, right? You can make your own choices, they can make their own choices, and you're no longer bound to them in some way. So if you have that kind of connection, it can really drive you to keep taking care of people that you really need to let go of. And if that's the case, it really is important to, disconnect energetically. And this is not something that you can just do in your head. It's not a switch that you flip. It's not like you can just I command to the universe that I'd be disconnected. It doesn't work like that. These are deeper, often semi-traumatic bonds. So there's some inner healing work around that needs to happen. But it's possible to energetically disconnect, and then you'll find that suddenly you look at the situation differently. You're like, yeah, I'm not sure why I was trying so hard to help them, because obviously they don't want it. It's not helping, and I wasn't having any kind of fun doing it, and it was just like more and more disasters waiting to happen. So suddenly you can then see from a distance, yeah, this is not a good situation to get involved in. But when you have that energetic connection with someone, you don't feel that way. It just becomes automatic. Of course I need to help them. It becomes almost like instinctual. Like, how dare you suggest that I let them go? How dare you suggest that I just let them fall off a cliff and not do anything, right? It's because deep, deep down, you're still connected to them, and their fate becomes your fate. And, you might say, yeah, but that's still really nice and loving, and you just want to help. And it's like, no, because at a certain point, the helping becomes controlling, right? Helping is when you are, enthusiastic and motivated, and you have ideas and techniques and ways to support someone where they can become independent again. So they're not dependent on, you're not carrying them, but you're like, oh, you're going through a rough patch. I have some things that can help. I'd be happy to help you through this rough patch, and then you can be independent again, do your own thing. That's what helping is. But if you're just like chronically feeling like you need to pull someone out of the sludge all the time, it becomes rescuing, but it also becomes controlling, because if someone's going down the sludge all the time, there's some choices that they're making in their life that are making that happen. And it's up to them to connect those dots and to start to take responsibility and say, oh, when I keep doing this, it keeps leading to that, and I don't want that anymore. This is not something that you can decide or that you can do for them. And if you try to decide or do that for them, you're really just controlling them. You're really just bullying them in a certain way, right? And this is why I want to point that out, that energetic connection, because it can become very desperate. Like when you're trying to help someone from a good place, but you have energetic connection, it can start to transition into a controlling relationship where you want to force them to heal because you're terrified that they'll drag you down with them. In that case, it's really important to know it's possible to disconnect energetically, and then you can both have separate lives again, and they can do what they want to do and you can do what you want to do. All right, so those are my 3 big reasons why it can be hard to, when you're helping someone, know how to stop. I wanted to talk about this because I think I haven't really seen people talk about this. And it's not as clear cut or obvious as some people would like to make it seem. If you are struggling with something like this, you're like, I'd like to talk about this and get some help with this, set up a clarity call with me and we can chat about it. I can give you some feedback and tips. And if you need a healing process, we can get the healing process started. All right. I hope this was helpful for you. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.